Well, thank you for attending today's Ask the Expert session. Today we'll be covering job searching from the perspective of a high school student and a college student. So we are recording today's session, so those that are unable to make it today can view it at a later time. We will have opportunities for questions, but please feel free to use the chat feature to post your questions as well. My name is Lori Myers, and I'm the director here at the Missouri Job Center of St. Charles County. And with me today are our panelists to include Marcy Whelan. Marcy is a senior talent acquisition consultant with ROI Search Partners. We also have Becky Feldman, and Becky is the Assistant Vice President, Senior Employee Experience Designer for Talent Management at Commerce Bank. And we also have Jenny Rogers, and Jenny is also a Senior Talent Acquisition Consultant with ROI Search Partners. So thank you all for being with us today, and we'll kick it off with Marcy to talk about resumes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Lori. We're excited to be here today. First and foremost, one thing that I want to share is if you take away nothing else from today's session, do not recreate the wheel. There are so many resources out there, and so much of that we're going to highlight today. But for example, if you're looking to start your career as a graphic designer, search up graphic designer sample resumes and use that as a benchmark so that you're really able to capture a lot of the things that you have experience with that you may not remember, or and benchmarking from them can be very, very helpful. Secondly, use the KISS method. Keep it simple, right? There are 4 different sections, basic sections, that I recommend that you use in a resume. That's going to be your contact information, summary statement, education and skills, and work experience. Decide on the resume format. There are 2 main formats that you can use: a chronological resume, which is experience in reverse order, and then functional, which really highlights the skills and achievements rather than the experience. What I would say is this: chronological resume is the easiest for recruiters to get through, as well as hiring managers. Functional resumes tend to be a seek and find. And when there are 20 or 30 resumes behind yours that a recruiter or a hiring manager can be looking at, they're only going to take a couple of seconds. And if they can't find the information that they need easily on your resume, they're going to move on to that other candidate. So again, chronological resume is the easiest path to go. Pay attention to technical details: punctuation, grammatical errors, spelling, any error that can make your resume look unprofessional. Leverage your resource centers at high school, college, a friend or a family member that's really got great eyes for grammatical errors, punctuation errors, just as a second pair of eyes to look at your resume. Use consistent formatting: 1-inch margins, 11 or 12 point font, and bullet points are your friend. And unless you're applying for a creative role such as an artist, do not use fancy formats, fonts, or tables. They do not convert well when applying online. Contact information: make sure your contact information is correct. It sounds silly, it sounds simplistic, but it happens more times than it should. Your voicemail should be set up, and there needs to be a room for additional messages, and the recording should be professional. I can't tell you the number of times that I've called and either the voicemail is not professional, or there's no additional room for me to even leave a voicemail for someone. I'm probably not going to go back to that candidate because, again, I've got 20 or 30 candidates behind that person that I can move on to. All right, and then the same goes when it comes to that professional piece. The same goes for your email address. Ask yourself if it's audience appropriate. Rule of thumb: if it's not an email address that you would give out to your girlfriend or your boyfriend's grandparents, you don't want to hand it out to an employer either. Set up a designated email address. They're free. I was just talking with someone yesterday who's getting ready to graduate in May from college, and he used his first name, last name, .business at gmail.com. It's distinguishable, it's professional. He was a business degree graduate or will be a business degree graduate. And so it made sense. And never introduce bias. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you have first name, last name, and the year you were born, you're immediately introducing bias, and you don't want to do that. Then qualifications do not always make the hire. So you have to think about what sets you apart. Do not do your research, study the job description, the company, the mission, the vision, and look for specific keywords and requirements that align you with the skills and talents that the company is looking for. From babysitting and lawn mowing, volunteering work to extracurricular activities such as clubs and sports, you should include all previous experience that illustrates your work ethic and your ability to participate in team-based activities. And a reminder to include your enthusiasm, desire, and energy and passion. Highlight any experience that showcases your discipline, commitment, and willing to work hard. And lastly, for this particular slide, check twice and apply once. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to a sample high school resume. Again, you're going to notice that it's broken out into 4 sections. First and foremost, contact information. Notice that we added LinkedIn and Twitter. Not required, yet highly recommended. There's a lot of great YouTube videos, and there are other online resources out there to help you set up and build your professional LinkedIn profile. Also, as you're doing it, LinkedIn does a really great job of walking you through it as well. So it's really worth checking out. Secondly, we have that career objective. This is your sales pitch. Very important. It gives employers a clear idea of why you're applying for the role and how their decision to hire you could be beneficial. Recruiters, hiring managers, they're only going to spend a few seconds looking at your resume. You want to make sure that you give them reason to continue to reading, and this career objective is where that can be found. All right, moving on to education. Notice how much additional information is included in the education section. Because you're probably not going to have a ton of applicable or relevant work experience to pull from as a high school graduate, you're gonna wanna really beef up this education section. Notice they've included being the president of high school yearbook committee, showing leadership, showing teamwork. They're quantifying some of the bullet points. Also included some coursework that is most likely very relevant to the job that they're applying for. Okay. And then experience section, you want to include not only the responsibilities of the job, but quantifiable accomplishments relative to the job that you're applying for. For example, under this first job, raised $2,000 annually for homeless animals. Again, quantifying an accomplishment, it really shows that you go above and beyond. All right, and then at the very bottom, also notice the hard skills and the soft skills. Both are very important. And hard skills, let's say, for example, you're applying for an internship as a graphic designer. Things that you want to include are probably going to be Photoshop, InDesign, logo creation, things of that nature. And then soft skills wise, these are the skills that are rooted in your personality and are not often and not easily taught. So it's active listening, it's verbal communication, accepting constructive criticism, customer service, problem solving, anything like that. All right. Okay, now we're going to move on to the college grad resume. Again, same general sections. You have contact information. Notice in the summary or profile statement / career objective statement, this is going to be a little bit more robust, potentially. Notice that they've included the internship experience that highlights right away, first sentence. Summary also includes the role that the candidate is applying for and any relevant hard skills applicable to the job. And then the candidate also moves into soft skills by using such words as detail-oriented. All right. Education section, not much difference here either. One thing that I do want to mention is that once you have moved on to your college career, you do not have to mention your high school career any longer. Employers are really more interested in the activities that you participated in during your college career at this point. Now, with that being said, there's always exceptions to every rule, right? And if for whatever reason there's a lot of applicable experience that you want to bring in from your high school days, that's fine too. Professional experience, and then last but not least, you have additional skills that are included at the bottom of the resume. One thing that we recommend is that you want to include keywords that are searchable. So again, back to those hard skills and soft skills, make sure that any applicable and relevant keywords that are applicable to the job that you have included in your resume as well. All right. And then applying for the job. Before applying for the position, consider your current contacts or connections. Think of friends and families that you know, family members that you know that might have a connection with the targeted company that can vouch for you. Becky's going to talk to you in more depth about the value of networking here in just a minute. Prepare for rejection. Oh goodness, I can't say enough about this. When I graduated from college, as many do, you expect that you're going to set the world on fire, and you will. You will eventually. However, you have to know that nobody gets accepted to every place that they apply to. And there is a right way to handle that rejection and a wrong way. If you get a rejection from a company, the best thing that you can do for yourself is to thank them for their time and let them know that you have interest in future opportunities. Never burn a bridge. This is a small, big world, and 6 degrees of separation is a real thing. Never underestimate the power of follow-up. It is acceptable and shows your interest to follow up every, 7 to 10 days probably, when you're still in consideration for a position, or as appropriate based on the conversation with the recruiter or the manager of that role. And make a list of the places that you've applied and stay organized. This is really important, especially if you're working with a third party, because what you don't want to do is to apply for a job online with an employer, get a call from a third party recruiter and have them submit you to. It never looks favorable for you if you don't look like you are organized with the positions that you apply for. All right, so that is it for this particular section. And now Becky is going to talk to you about networking.
All right, thank you, Marcy. I know we have so much content to cover today. Everything could be its own session. So if we are flying along, just know that there's so much more that you can dive into any of the topics that we're going to be talking about today. But what I want to talk about really is how to set yourself apart. And I do want to kind of touch base on something that Marcy just mentioned of, preparing for a rejection. I also want you to prepare for waiting. So, as you think you're going to graduate and you're going to set the world on fire and you're going to get that job, it might not happen in the time frame that you have in your mind. So be patient and be positive. Some of the stuff that I'm going to talk to you about is going to help set you apart so that maybe things will move more quickly because of how you are presenting yourself and how you are using your connections. So you really need to learn how to talk about yourself, and you need to be able to talk about yourself in a concise way because you have just a little bit of time to make an impression, whether it's on your resume, whether it's on a virtual meeting, whether it's shaking someone's hand when we can do that at some point in the future. You need to be able to talk about yourself and not just say, I like working with people. That's something that we hear very often when people apply for jobs in HR. You need to be able to say a little bit more than that. And it starts with really writing your story. And this is not something that we're going to do today. This is a kind of takeaway activity for you to do. But it's really putting together that summary that you're going to put at the top of your resume that you're going to use as a virtual introduction. Lots of different ways that you can use this. But you want to make sure that you are sharing really who you are, being real, being genuine, speaking in the kind of voice that you would use in an actual conversation with someone. Writing in the first person. You don't want to talk about yourself. You want to be yourself as you're doing this. And here are some questions to really kind of help guide you through that, and to share something personal and to really start to build that connection. And another thing that's helpful is really to start with the end in mind. When someone is looking at your profile on LinkedIn, or if they're reading your resume, what key things do you want them to walk away with? Make sure that that's in that summary. I also have another list of questions to really help you with writing that story. And one of them that I think is really important here is, how would you describe what you do to someone who's completely unfamiliar with what you do and where you've been? You really need to learn to boil that down into language that everyone will understand, and not just kind of what you've learned in your experience. You need to be able to break it down and tell that story. What do you love most about what you do? What motivates you? This is how you bring your passion and your energy to your summary. As Marcy mentioned, that your resume is not just a list of your kind of accomplishments and your work experience, but really your passion and your energy and where you want to go. I do have a couple of examples, just like Marcy did, of some college grads who wrote their story by using those questions. And I think what's important here is, really saying what other people have thought of your work. And as a high school grad and a college grad, you might not have a lot of employers who have given you feedback, but you definitely have teachers and coaches. Make sure that you're utilizing the feedback from those individuals to showcase your work and to showcase how you show up in the workplace. Another example here from a college grad, sharing his experience, sharing where he wants to go and what he can contribute in the work environment, a positive attitude, strong work ethic, and again, touching on what his managers and coworkers would say about him. And as we all know, all good stories have a title. So after you start to craft that story, make sure that you share it with someone close to you to say, do you have any questions? Is there anything that I missed? What am I not saying about myself that I need to? And that will help get you to crafting your title for the story. So on the slide here, you see my headline, Marcy's and Jenny's, and they're all very different. And that's purposeful, because this is sharing who we are uniquely and individually. So make sure you give some time and some thought to what your professional headline is, so that it has someone take a look at that and walk away with, gosh, I really want to get to know Becky and Marcy and Jenny. So as I mentioned, some ways to use your story in personal introduction, as a summary on your resume, and then lastly on your LinkedIn profile. Your LinkedIn profile is something that you should also walk away with a to-do after this. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, again, just Google. They'll walk you through it, and really get that summary out there as a starting point to start to build out that profile. So next, let's just talk through some quick networking strategies. Getting active on LinkedIn, again, is the first step, but also really planning for those purposeful connections and learning the art of the informational interview. You don't need to apply for every job you see. Sometimes you just need to have a conversation with someone about what it's like to work in that field, at that company, etc. And then lastly, volunteering. When it comes to LinkedIn, you don't have to be the person who posts 3 times a day, but you do need to have a profile out there, and you do need to get active with liking and reading and sharing other people's materials. At some point, you might want to generate your own content, and at that point, go for it. But for now, just like, share, be active, be visible. I do have a challenge for all of you to plan for purposeful connection. So a 30-day networking challenge. Reach out to someone that in a field that you're interested in. Reach out to someone who has a job that you've heard them talk about, but you really have never had a conversation, and just learn more about it. Maybe reach out to someone who works at a company that you've always admired. Reach out to someone who just landed their first job and ask them, what should I do? What are some tips you have for me? Talk to someone who's changed careers over the course of their professional life. And there's lots of other things to think about here, but planning for purposeful connections will really create that list for you to start to go out and have these informational interviews. So an informational interview is very different than applying for a job. It is really just an informal meeting to talk about real world experiences with someone. And I think it's important to make the distinction here that your objective in an informational interview is to get advice, to just have a conversation with someone. It's not to get a job. So make sure that you make that clear that that's not what you're looking for. It's really just a conversation to get to know one another and to get some advice from someone in that field at that company. But prepare for it the same way that you would prepare for an actual interview. And Jenny's going to share more about that. So I'm not going to go into detail about how to prepare for an interview because she's going to cover that. But the next two slides here kind of go through some questions that you might want to consider as you prepare for this informational interview. So ask these individuals what kind of problems they deal with. You know, what do they like best or least about their work? What are some current trends and issues in the field that you should become aware of? You know, what steps would you recommend I take to prepare to enter this field? And ask them, you know, how it went for them. If you could do it all over again, would you choose the same path? If not, what would you change? And just learn about their life experiences. So as you prepare for these informational interviews, the follow-up is just the same as it would be for a job interview. Make sure that you are taking note of what you learned, thanking them for their time. It can be an email. Jenny's going to mention that's just fine to have email, a handwritten note if you'd like, and make sure you keep in touch. Networking is not always about creating more connections, but it's about purposeful connections and maintaining relationships that are worthwhile. So make sure you keep in touch. And then lastly, get involved. You know, if you are having trouble landing a job after college, or if you're just looking for ways to beef up your resume as a high school graduate, you know, look for opportunities to get involved. It might be an employee resource group at your current employer. There may be special projects that you can raise your hand for. And look for causes that are important to you. There even are virtual opportunities to volunteer. And you can find a lot of opportunities through the United Way if you just go to their website. Or consider, if you're a college grad, consider joining a professional organization in your field of interest. It's a great way to get to know people that might help you land your first job. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, and she's going to walk you through how to prepare for that interview and the first day.
Awesome. Well, Marcy and Becky got us to the interview point, and so now the company is called and you're ready for an interview. Before you panic, let's just take a deep breath and figure out how to best prepare for this. So the first thing you want to keep in mind is that this is a two-way conversation. It is not all about the company, nor is it all about you. This needs to be a fit for both of you. And when it's your first job, you tend to be a little more eager, possibly desperate. So you want to dial that back a little bit and make sure, think of it like a date. Is this someone you want to continue moving forward with? Then you're going to do your research plan and practice. I'm tripping, sorry. So you need to be prepared for this interview. First step is research. So you all know how to do these things. You need to look at the company's webpage, check out their history, their values, what they say about their culture. If there's anything going on in the news, a lot of companies have that recent in the news things. Look on LinkedIn at the profiles of the people you'll be interviewing with. Take a glance at how long they've been there. Did they advance in their career to get there? Was this a change for them? So that you can have relevant questions. Then you need to prepare for the interview questions. You're gonna get the tell me about yourself. You're gonna get the why do you want this job, or why are you qualified for this job? And then likely there'll be some behavior-based interview questions. Just like everything else, there are a ton of samples of these out on the internet. What you want to do is look through those questions, think through your life so far, so that tell me about a time you dealt with conflict. Well, you're in high school, so when have you had conflict? I guarantee you have. You've had it in group projects, you've had it on your swim team. Think through that and how that could, what you've learned through that, appeal to an employer, that you've kept a level head, that you were negotiating, that everyone worked together well. Jot down a few notes for what your answers might be for these questions. Don't script it all out. Don't try to write down sentences, just some notes so that it can free flow as you're in the interview. That tell me about yourself piece, that should be a 2-minute version of your story. Do not ramble on for 10 minutes. Use your Becky, you created a story, there's your intro. So what is it about you? Why do you want this job? It might be because you need a job, but let's not say that. Let's go with what about that company appeals to you? What about that job appeals to you? And then just keep moving forward. You should know also that the company is researching you. So whatever profile information you have online, that's available to them as well. So be prepared to answer anything relevant to your contents. I'm not telling you what to put out there or not to put out there, but just know they can look up you too. So then you need to plan the logistics of your interview. What are you going to wear? Regardless of Zoom or in person, you need to be professional. It doesn't always mean a full suit, but it definitely means not a t-shirt. If you're, and I'm sorry about the dog, if you can hear that. Perfect timing. If the interview is in person, you should map your route and drive it. How long does it take? When should you leave? If it's on Zoom, test your connection. Look at what's behind you. If you don't have a clear space, put up one of those backgrounds, make it look professional. Where can you set your notes so that you can look directly at the camera? No one wants to do an interview with the person looking this way the whole time because their notes are over here. So you need to be able to face the camera. Do you have a pen and a notebook, extra copies of your resume if you're in person? If you're also in person, do you have the phone number for the main contact should you run late? And then the practice part. Yes, this is awkward, but it's definitely worth it. Practice with a friend, have them ask you questions. Honestly, practice saying the answers to your questions out loud. You can use the voice record feature on your phone so that you can see if you're doing something awkward, if it doesn't flow, if you say a lot of ums and likes, do that. And then again, with the practice, drive the route, test the Zoom, check your lighting. You should also have questions prepared for the interviewer. Think about what you would want to know about that company or that person that may be your hiring manager. So why did you choose to work here? What keeps you here? What does success look like in this role? What are they expecting you to do when you come in the door? And then always wrap up with, do they have any concerns about you that you haven't addressed in this conversation? So now that you're prepared, it's the day of the interview. So be on time. In person, be early. Sometimes things happen. That's life, traffic accidents. You need to call, ask if they want to reschedule, if you should continue and be late. With the Zoom, be on time as well. Maybe 5 to 10 minutes early, not a bad thing. Be respectful. In person, wear a mask if that's what they're doing. If they're comfortable shaking hands and you're comfortable shaking hands, do so. It's a little awkward right now, but it'll get better. If it's a Zoom, you need to log in and be ready, review your notes and be patient. And most importantly, be present. So silence your phone, silence that smartwatch. You need to make eye contact with everyone you're speaking with, and that applies to in-person or online. If you find yourself distracted by looking at your own camera picture when you're on Zoom, make sure you hide that so that you can give your full attention to that little light and the people's pictures in there. Try not to mess with your hair. Doing this the whole time makes people nuts. Be thoughtful. Before you answer each question, pause and take a deep breath. I am a fast talker. I like to react fast. That's not always the best thing. So when you're asked a question, take a breath and then answer. Speak a little slowly, slower than you think you need to, so that you can calm your nerves. I say less is more in any answer. You can always share additional details, but there's a lot of feedback we get. They rambled on for 10 minutes and we didn't even know what they were talking about. So succinctly answer your question. If it doesn't seem like it's landing, look at the faces and say, is there something else I can offer or clarify for you? And be grateful. Thank everyone you meet with. Ask if they're comfortable sharing their email address. If they don't want to, you can go back through your main contact and ask them to share the thank you notes. And even if you think this interview went horribly, thank them for their time. You don't know when you're going to need someone in the future. So after the interview, you want to send a thank you note. I would recommend waiting 24 hours, but that's it before you send a thank you note. And the reason I recommend the waiting part is you are probably replaying this interview in your mind and you're thinking of things you should have, could have said. If you wait 24 hours and think it a little more objectively, you'll realize, okay, I should have gone in deeper on just this one area. You can address that in your thank you note. Take a kind lens to yourself, but basically you want to type a 3 to 5 sentence email. Thank them for their time, share what you learned, that you're still interested in the role, what about that role and company appeals to you, and then if you needed to clarify something else, share that then. Follow up with your point of contact, whether it's the hiring manager, the recruiter, or a third-party recruiter at the agreed upon timeline. Generally speaking, when you're leaving, they'll tell you what next steps will look like and when you can expect that. If you don't hear anything in a week, that's a fair time to reach out. Do not stalk your hiring manager daily. That's just a little bit annoying. As Becky mentioned at her part, it's time to be patient. So now let's assume you've made it all the way through and you have an offer. Fantastic. What you need to know is this. The minute you're given an offer, you do not have to accept it right then and there. And quite honestly, much like the 24-hour thank you note, it's a good idea to say, I'm really excited. I appreciate this offer. Can I have a day to think on it? And that gives you time to feel like, is this the best move for you? Are you jumping because you need a job? And that can be okay too, but to really figure out what's happening. This is your only opportunity to negotiate your salary. While I'm a big fan of that, I also have to say a lot of times entry-level jobs are what they are. So if it's in the range that they told you about, you might just want to take it. There's a lot of tools out there for negotiating your salary, but this is the only time to do it. And then when you are ready to accept their offer, you're likely to get it in writing, and that's when you'll sign and accept and commit. And that's where I'd like to share that you need to be committed to that. Do not continue interviewing with other companies, because if you burn that bridge, it's going to be trouble in the long run. And then celebrate. You can announce your position to your family and friends. I would wait until your first day to announce it on social media, and then talk about how excited you are. You're now an ambassador of that organization, and they want to utilize you in that way. Then you get to the onboarding paperwork piece. That may come to you before your first day or on your first day. And that is what is your tax withholdings going to look like for a payroll? We need a copy of your driver's license and social security card. What do you want for benefits? So if they're sent to you before, fill them out timely, return them. If they're not sent to you before, plan on bringing your driver's license and social security card to your first day, because they'll need those things. So for the first day, much like an interview, arrive early, but do not be ridiculously early. 5 to 10 minutes should do it. Bring a notebook and pen. In person, or if you're being onboarded online, you're going to hear so many buzzwords in your new job, and you're not going to know what they're saying. So this is your chance to jot notes, make eye contact with somebody, and plan to follow up later to ask what all of those words meant. And if you're in person, bring your lunch, just in case no one thought to take you out on your first day. They should, but you want to be prepared if you're not. If you weren't sent that pre-hired paperwork, bring your information for that. Be prepared to shake a lot of hands and meet a lot of people. Be authentic and genuine. You are not going to remember everyone's name. You're one person. They're all going to remember your name, and that's okay. It is okay for the first week to say, I know we met and I'm blanking on your name, but try then to commit them to memory. Again, be aware of your relationship with technology. Do not check your phone messages while you're in meetings with people. Do not look at your watch while you're in meetings with people. Be present. Beyond that, be a good employee and teammate. Plan to stay in this role for a while, maybe ideally 2 years before you move on. Set a reasonable expectation for yourself. This is your first job. You're going to learn a lot. You might not set the world on fire, or you might, and it doesn't matter. It's just about getting this experience and learning from it. Learn everything you can about the company, the roles. Ask your hiring manager if it's okay to schedule meetings with other hiring leaders so you can learn about the business as a whole. It'll help you be a valuable asset. Speak up with opportunities for improvements. It is not your hiring manager's job to map out your career path. You have control of it. So keep your eyes and ears open and make those connections. I think that's it.
Yep. A lot of great information. Does anyone have any questions for the panelists?
I do on resumes. It's Suzanne here. I do the youth program, so I work with 16 and 24-year-olds. I know you had said the summary statement. Do you guys like the like a skill section up top where it has like one words? Like, is that still okay? Like,
Yeah, so like your keywords, is that essentially, yep, absolutely. Sometimes I see those on the bottom of the resume, sometimes right there, right underneath that objective statement. But either way, yeah, as long as it's searchable and easily to be found, absolutely. Great point.
Yep.
Okay.
And I would absolutely support that too. You know, when we talked about the chronological versus functional resume, sometimes people go the functional resume route because they like the ability to highlight those things. But you can place those skills on the chronological resume so that you can have a nicely ordered resume that's readable with the skills section.
And do you like would you rather have a 1-page resume or is a 2-page okay?
Personally, I think when they are, high school and college graduates, usually you should be able to get it on one page, but it's absolutely okay to flow onto a second page. Becky, Jenny, would you agree with that?
I would. I feel like with hiring managers, we're lucky to get them through that top half of the page. They're going to want to dig further. And then if you just start talking about every award you've ever won, if it's not relevant to the role, don't put it on there. For example, I had somebody who they scored a hole-in-one on a golf course. That's neat. What does that have to do with this job? That's for your Facebook, Instagram, whatever profile versus the resume.
Yeah.
And is it okay? Like some of my kids maybe dropped out of high school and didn't really participate in high school and they don't have a lot of work experience. So sometimes that's when I do a functional resume. Is that okay? Okay.
I think that's a great plan, especially if they've had more real life world experience than say the educational piece. And you can put that they attended the high school and just not put a graduation date. You don't need to call attention to it, but you're also not misstating it, and stick to putting those skills and opportunities up top. And it might only be half a page to start, but I don't think there's a huge expectation from hiring managers that every high schooler can fill a page.
Okay.
And I think that's where it gets important, especially with those students who didn't graduate, to tell a story of the life experiences in the summary. You're not calling it out that you didn't graduate, but what did you do during that time that is setting you up for success now?
And I usually put on, because some of mine don't have any work history, but I put on like babysitting and grass cutting. Is that still okay?
Yep.
Absolutely.
And then also, sorry,
Really fair.
do you suggest a cyber safe resume? I know that's kind of a thing, or do you not worry about that?
I think it's important. A lot of people just put, instead of putting their actual address on a resume, they just put location, St. Louis, Missouri, or whatever. That's fair. Again, we kind of talked about that email address, like it being a designated email address for your job search. And if people aren't comfortable doing a phone number, that's okay too. It's wherever your comfort level is. Yeah.
And I've seen people put Jenny R instead of Jenny Rogers. That's fair too, because when you get to the official paperwork portion, you'll be giving them all of your information. So to get in the door, you can be Jenny R, St. Louis, Missouri, with your email address. That's fair.
Thank you.
Great question.
I wanted to point out one thing that I just thought about now as we were talking about those resumes. Everyone puts their GPA on there from college. Perhaps your GPA isn't so shiny and pretty, and that's okay. You do not have to put it on there. Just put what your degree is. And also, if you helped support yourself on your way through college by working part-time jobs, go ahead and call that out. If you're the person who's responsible for all of the loans, you've been working 20 hours a week, it's okay to put a statement that you've personally financed 100% of your education. That shows your commitment as well to not only your education, but to doing a good job at work. So that's something to highlight that employers would like to see.
Yeah, Jenny, and I think with that too, that may be the reason why you didn't get involved in extracurriculars at
Right.
school, because you were working full time in addition to carrying a full course load.
I had a question about how important volunteer work is, and should it be listed on the resume?
Absolutely. So anything that you do above and beyond the regular course of duty with respect to high school and college, I would certainly include.
Yep. I think that helps to tell the fuller story, especially if you volunteered for a cause that you really care about. It tells more about who you are. And then the other thing that it does is it creates an opportunity for another connection. So maybe that person knows someone who also volunteers with that organization. So it's going to start a conversation and further that relationship.
And should you put it under work experience or separate it to volunteer experience?
I would put it underneath a separate section, but put it underneath work experience.
Okay, thank you.
And sometimes that's just labeled as interests, if you want to put it that way, because perhaps you play competitive soccer still on a rec team and you volunteer some way. You can bullet all of those things under simply an interest category.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know we keep adding on, but another thing I think about with that volunteer thing, it also adds the ability for the employer to reach out to maybe someone that they know and say, tell me more about Becky. So just kind of keep that in mind too.
Yeah.
Good point and great questions. Any last questions before we close out? All right, well, that concludes our Ask the Expert session today. So special thanks to our panelists, Marcy, Jenny, and Becky. Thank you so much for being with us today. If you'd like assistance with your job search or would like more information about the Missouri Job Center in St. Charles County, feel free to call us at 636-255-6060, or you can email us at workforce@sccmo.org. So thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Yeah.